I never thought the smallest mistake could unravel an entire marriage. It was such an ordinary thing, really, just a phone left on a desk. Not hidden. Not locked away. Just sitting there, screen face up, like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. It was a Thursday morning, crisp and quiet, with the faint hum of the city seeping through the half-open window of my home office. I was going through a stack of client reports, sipping coffee that had already gone cold, when I noticed it, Lauren's phone, sitting right on top of my paperwork. My wife, Lauren Hale, wasn't the type to leave things behind. She was meticulous, calculated, traits that made her one of the youngest, most successful CEOs in the tech industry. She managed multimillion-dollar deals with the same ease most people reserved for ordering coffee. Organized to the point of obsession, her phone was like an extension of her, always glued to her hand, her lifeline to boardrooms, investors, and whatever new venture she was building next. But there it was. Unattended. Unlocked. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd been in a rush, maybe she'd meant to grab it but got distracted. But as I reached for the stack of papers underneath, the screen lit up. A message preview popped up. "I can't stop thinking about last night, you're driving me crazy. When can I see you again?" The name at the top glared back at me like a slap to the face. Ethan S. Ethan. Her assistant. 20 years old, fresh out of business school, the kind of guy who probably still thought craft beer was a personality trait. I'd met him once at a company event, clean-cut, sharp suit, with that overconfident smile of someone who'd never really been told no in life. I remembered how Lauren had introduced him with an easy laugh, calling him indispensable. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. Why would I? But now, my hand hovered over the phone, heart pounding harder than it should. I knew I shouldn't look. That's what trust was, right? Not invading each other's privacy. But that message, it wasn't the kind you sent to your boss. Curiosity turned to dread as my thumb moved almost on its own, opening the thread. "Ethan. I can't stop thinking about last night, you're driving me crazy. When can I see you again? Lauren. Maybe after my meeting with the investors. I can swing by your place. Miss you already? Ethan. Miss you more. Last night was insane. I can still feel you." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my mind raced. This wasn't some innocent work banter. This was real. Intimate. Betrayal. I sat back, the room suddenly colder, my chest tight. My mind tried to catch up, flipping through memories like a Rolodex of moments now tainted with doubt. Late nights at the office. Business trips that always seemed to pop up last minute. The way she'd been distant lately, distracted even when we were together. I'd brushed it off as work stress, the pressures of running a company. But now I wasn't so sure. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled further up, heart pounding with each new message. They'd been texting for months. Flirty messages at first, inside jokes, casual compliments. But then it escalated. Hotel meetups. Quick lunches that lasted hours. Mentions of things I couldn't unsee, his apartment, her favorite wine, nights they'd spent together when she claimed to be out. Networking. A knot formed in my stomach, heavy and suffocating. I felt like an idiot. How long had I been blind to this? Just then, I heard the front door open. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp, confident heels against the hardwood floors. The sound that had always been comforting now felt like nails on a chalkboard. Panic surged through me. I locked the phone and slid it back onto the desk like nothing had happened, my heart racing as if I'd been caught doing something wrong. But I wasn't the one hiding anything. She appeared in the doorway, flawless as ever, tailored blazer, silk blouse, hair pulled into that perfect low bun she always wore to meetings. Her eyes darted to her phone, then to me. "Oh, I must have left this here," she said casually, picking it up without a second thought. She didn't seem nervous. No flicker of guilt. Just the same composed Lauren I'd always known. Or thought I'd known. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile so tight it hurt. "You left it on my papers." She tucked the phone into her bag and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I flinched, just slightly, but enough that she paused, giving me a curious glance. "You okay?" she asked, her voice light, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, suspicion maybe. "Just tired," I muttered, turning back to my computer. "Didn't sleep well." She nodded, not pressing further. "I'll be home late tonight. Dinner with some clients." "Of course." "Sure," I said, pretending to focus on the screen in front of me as she walked away. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sat there, staring at nothing, my mind unraveling just like the facade of our marriage. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to feel. But one thing was certain, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The house felt different after Lauren left, like the walls themselves knew what I had discovered, their silence heavier than usual. I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, though I couldn't process a single word. My mind was a storm of disbelief, anger, and something I couldn't quite name yet. I picked up my coffee, now ice cold, and took a sip out of habit more than anything else. It tasted bitter, metallic, wrong. Just like everything else. How long had this been going on? Months at least. The texts didn't lie. All those late nights, weekend trips, sudden, emergency, meetings, it was all there in black and white. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, was sneaking around with a guy young enough to still think hangovers were funny. But she'd come home like nothing had happened. Kissed my cheek. Smiled. Lied. And I let her. The realization burned more than the betrayal itself. I'd always thought I'd know, thought I'd be able to sense if something was off. But I didn't. Not until her phone, like some cosmic joke, landed right in front of me. I needed answers. I found myself pacing the living room, my footsteps echoing against the polished floors Lauren insisted we refinish last spring. I looked around, really looked this time. The framed photos on the walls, our wedding, vacations, family gatherings, all felt staged now, like props in a play I didn't realize I was a supporting actor in. I pulled out my phone and did what any rational person would do in a situation like this. I Googled him. Ethan Summers. LinkedIn popped up first. Assistant to the CEO at Brightwave Technologies. His smug face stared back at me, a corporate headshot, clean-cut, with that practiced smile designed to impress potential employers. Bachelor's degree from some mid-tier business school, a resume full of internships that probably required more networking than actual work. I scrolled through his profile, my jaw tightening with every detail. There was nothing remarkable about him, nothing that stood out. Except for the fact that he was sleeping with my wife. I slammed my laptop shut, the sound echoing through the empty room. What the hell was I supposed to do? Confront her? Ask her if she was cheating like some clueless fool who didn't already know the answer? No. I needed more. Not just texts. I wanted proof. The kind that couldn't be explained away with excuses about misunderstandings, or, "It's not what it looks like." I grabbed my keys and left the house without a plan, just the overwhelming need to get out before I suffocated in my own thoughts. The drive was a blur. At some point, I found myself parked outside her office building downtown, a sleek glass tower that screamed success. I'd been here dozens of times for corporate events, holiday parties, even just to pick her up after late meetings. I knew every inch of that lobby. But today, I wasn't a proud husband waiting for his accomplished wife. Today, I was a man hunting for the truth. I spotted him almost immediately. Ethan. He was standing near the cafe inside the lobby, holding a coffee cup, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. He looked relaxed, confident, like he didn't have a care in the world. Of course he didn't. Why would he? He wasn't the one being lied to. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind ran through every scenario, marching in there, punching him in the face, causing a scene. But that wasn't me. I wasn't reckless. I needed something more than a burst of anger. I needed to outthink them. I drove back home, calmer now, the rage simmering beneath the surface but controlled. When I walked through the door, I knew exactly what I had to do. Lauren was meticulous, yes, but no one hides everything perfectly. Especially when they get comfortable. I started in the bedroom. Her nightstand was mostly clutter-free, but tucked underneath a book was a small key, probably for her desk drawer in the home office. Interesting. I pocketed it and moved on. Her closet was next. I rifled through her bags, her coat pockets, even the tiny zippered compartments she probably thought no one would check. Receipts. Credit card slips. Hotel bookings. One in particular caught my eye. Hotel Meridian. Room 214. 2 nights. She'd stayed there 3 weeks ago when she claimed she was at a tech conference in Chicago. But this wasn't in Chicago. It was 15 minutes from our house. My heart pounded again, not with shock this time but with a cold, calculating clarity. I went to her office, the key fitting perfectly into the locked drawer. Inside were more papers, contracts, reports, nothing suspicious, until I found a small black notebook tucked beneath a stack of files. I opened it. It wasn't what I expected. Not a diary. Not love notes. But it was worse in a way. Dates. Meetings. Times. Ethan's name appeared more than once, usually next to vague notes like catch up or strategy session. It wasn't much. But it was enough. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, making sure to put everything back exactly how I found it. She'd never know I'd been there. Not yet. By the time Lauren got home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, calm, composed, like any other normal Thursday. She breezed through the door, her face lighting up with that practiced smile. Long day, she sighed, dropping her keys on the counter. Dinner with clients ran late. I looked up from my laptop, my face an unreadable mask. Yeah, I said softly. I bet it did. She didn't even flinch. But that was okay. Because the game had just begun. The hardest part wasn't finding out Lauren was cheating. It wasn't even the messages, the hotel receipt, or the calendar filled with lies disguised as business meetings. No, the hardest part was pretending I didn't know. I spent the next few days trapped in a strange performance, playing the role of the clueless husband while my mind worked overtime, dissecting every word, every glance, every touch. It was like watching a movie where I already knew the ending, but I couldn't walk out of the theater. Lauren was flawless in her deception. She'd come home late, her excuses neat and polished like the press releases she crafted for her board meetings. The pitch with the investors ran over. Or, Ethan stayed back to help prep for Monday's rollout. She'd say, with that effortless smile, the same one that had once made me fall in love with her. I wondered if that smile had ever been real. But I played along. I nodded, asked about her day, laughed when I was supposed to, and kissed her goodnight like I wasn't drowning in betrayal. Because I needed more. I wasn't going to confront her with half-truths and suspicions. I wanted the full picture. Every lie, every detail. I wanted to hold the ugly, raw truth in my hands, undeniable and complete. So, I became someone else. I started with her phone. Lauren wasn't careless, not normally. The day she left it on my desk had been a fluke, a rare crack in her otherwise perfect armor. But I knew she was predictable in one way. She never changed her routines unless she had to. Her phone's passcode? The same 4 digits she used for everything, our wedding anniversary. I waited until she was in the shower, the sound of water masking the faint click as I unlocked her phone. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the sick adrenaline that comes with knowing you're about to confirm your worst suspicions. The messages were still there. But now, I scrolled further. Ethan. Last night was amazing. Wish I could wake up next to you every day. Lauren. Me too. Soon, maybe. Let's not rush things. Soon. What the hell did that mean? I dug deeper. Photos. Nothing explicit, but enough to make my stomach twist. A blurry picture of a hotel room view, another of 2 wine glasses on a nightstand, her bare legs partially visible in the corner of the frame. I felt a coldness settle over me, sharp and unforgiving. I exited the messages and checked her email. Most were work-related, the usual corporate jargon. But one folder caught my eye. Personal. I opened it. Travel confirmations. Reservations. Hotel bookings. One email thread stood out. Subject: weekend plans. Ethan: are we still good for this weekend? I can't wait to get away with you. Lauren: of course. I told Mark I have a conference in Boston. He doesn't suspect a thing. Mark: that's me. I was just a name and an excuse now, a prop in her carefully curated life. I locked her phone and placed it back exactly where I found it. She came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp, smelling like lavender shampoo. She smiled at me, the same smile she probably gave him. I smiled back. The next day, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to plan. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, the clock ticking louder than usual. My mind replayed the last few years, our vacations, our anniversaries, the nights we stayed up talking about our future. Were any of those moments real? Or had I just been too blind to see the cracks forming beneath the surface? I thought about confronting her. Demanding answers. Screaming, maybe? But what would that accomplish? She'd deny it at first. Maybe cry. Maybe blame me. That's how these things go, right? No. I wasn't going to give her that power. I needed to be smarter. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Chris Dalton. Chris wasn't just an old friend. He was a private investigator. We met in college, lost touch, but reconnected a few years back. He owed me a favor. I hesitated for a second, my thumb hovering over the call button. Once I made this call, there was no going back. But then I thought about Lauren's laugh echoing through that hotel room, the texts, the lies, the ease with which she'd deceived me. I hit call. Chris? It's Mark. Mark, man, it's been a while. What's up? His voice was casual, unaware that my life was unraveling. I need your help, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. It's personal. There was a brief pause. Chris wasn't the type to pry unless invited. Okay, he said finally. Tell me everything. And I did. By the time I hung up, we had a plan. Chris would start tracking Lauren, discreetly. He'd follow her, get photos, document everything. I needed proof. Not just for me. For whatever came next. That night, Lauren came home late again. She walked in, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her face glowing from whatever lie she just lived. Sorry, babe, she said, kissing me on the cheek. Crazy day at the office. I looked at her, really looked. And I realized I didn't know this woman at all. But soon I would. Chris worked fast. It had only been 3 days since I made that call, and already he'd sent me the first batch of photos. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks from my house, heart pounding as I opened the email. There she was, Lauren, standing outside a cafe downtown. Not the corporate kind she usually favored, but one of those cozy little spots tucked between apartment buildings, the type you'd never think twice about. She wasn't alone. Ethan stood next to her, his hand resting casually on the small of her back, his face close to hers as they talked, laughing at something I couldn't hear but could imagine all too well. Another photo, this time, their hands intertwined as they crossed the street, heads leaning toward each other like 2 people who didn't have to hide. Except they did. The timestamp on the photos? Yesterday. The same day she told me she was buried in meetings all afternoon. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, like my ribs had caved in. But mixed with that ache was something else, something sharp, cold, and strangely satisfying. I had proof now. I stared at the images until my phone screen dimmed, then locked it and started the car. I didn't drive home right away. I needed time to breathe, to process, to figure out what the hell came next. I found myself at a park nearby, the kind of place families brought their kids on weekends. I sat on a worn bench, watching strangers live lives that hadn't just been shattered by a text message. My mind drifted back to when Lauren and I first met. She was magnetic, smart, ambitious, with a laugh that made you feel like you were in on some private joke. I was drawn to her, like everyone else. But I was the one she chose. Or so I thought. We built a life together. Shared dreams. Made promises. And now? Now she was building something with someone else. My phone buzzed, another message from Chris. Thought you'd want to see this. Just took it. I opened the photo. Lauren and Ethan, standing outside an apartment building I didn't recognize. Ethan unlocked the door, and she followed him inside. No hesitation. No looking over her shoulder. They weren't just sneaking around. They were comfortable. That was the worst part. I sat there for a long time after that, the cold air biting at my skin, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. Just facts. Just betrayal. When I finally drove home, the house felt different, emptier somehow, even though nothing had changed. I went through the motions like I always did, reheating leftovers, pretending to care about whatever show was on TV. Lauren came home around 9. Long day. She sighed, kicking off her heels by the door. She looked tired, but not the kind of tired you get from work. No, this was the kind of tired you get after spending hours pretending to be someone you're not. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips soft and familiar. If only I hadn't known where those lips had been an hour earlier. Everything okay? She asked, noticing the stiffness in my posture. Yeah, I lied. Just tired. She nodded, disappearing into the bathroom to shower. I sat there, staring at the door she just closed, wondering how long I could keep up this charade. The next morning, I met Chris at a diner on the outskirts of town. He slid into the booth across from me, looking exactly the same as he had back in college, slightly disheveled, perpetually exhausted, but sharp as ever. Got more? He said, pulling out a small folder. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what was inside. Thanks, I muttered, my voice low. Chris studied me for a moment. You okay? I almost laughed. What kind of question was that? But instead I just nodded. Yeah. I'm fine. Another lie. We sat in silence for a bit, the clatter of dishes and low murmur of conversation filling the space between us. What's your plan? Chris finally asked. I didn't have an answer. Confront her? Sure. But then what? Arguments? Apologies? Maybe tears if she felt like putting on a show. Or I could just walk away. Pack a bag. File for divorce. But none of that felt right. She'd spent months lying to me, gaslighting me, treating me like a background character in her new story. I didn't want closure. I didn't want explanations. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Betrayal. Loss. Emptiness. I'm not sure yet, I finally said. But I'll figure it out. Chris didn't push. He just nodded and slid out of the booth, leaving me alone with the folder. I opened it. More photos. More proof. But the one that stood out wasn't just of Lauren and Ethan. It was of Lauren, alone, standing on a balcony, staring out at the city, her face unreadable. For the first time, she looked small. And for the first time, I felt something other than rage. I felt nothing at all. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Lauren, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. She looked peaceful, her face relaxed in the faint glow of the streetlights seeping through the blinds. It was almost funny, how someone could lie so effortlessly, then sleep like they carried no weight at all. I turned my head, studying her profile. The woman I married was still there, same face, same soft curve of her jaw, same freckles dusted lightly across the bridge of her nose. But she wasn't the same. Or maybe she was, and I'd just never seen her for who she really was. I wasn't sure which was worse. The next morning was like every other. Lauren moved through her routine with practiced ease, coffee brewed, emails checked, a quick kiss on my cheek before she left for work. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't drowning in rage anymore. No, that would have been easier. Anger had sharp edges, easy to grab onto. But what I felt now was hollow, an emptiness so vast it felt like I could fall into it and never hit the bottom. And yet, beneath that emptiness, there was something else. Clarity. I didn't want to confront her, not yet. Confrontation would give her control, a chance to twist the narrative, to cry, to blame, to manipulate. She was good at that. It's what made her such an effective CEO, her ability to control the story, to make people see what she wanted them to see. But not this time. This time, I'd control the story. I spent the day going through every detail Chris had sent me, photos, messages, notes. I wasn't just looking at evidence anymore. I was looking for patterns, for leverage. By the afternoon, I had a plan. I started small. While Lauren was still at work, I logged into our shared bank account. She never bothered to change the passwords. It was all still under the same combination we'd set up years ago, her birthday. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe signs of financial transactions she'd hidden, maybe unexplained expenses. It didn't take long to find something. A series of payments to a rental property management company, monthly transfers labeled as consulting expenses. But they weren't from her business account. They were from ours. I dug deeper. The property wasn't far from here. In fact, it was less than 10 miles away. I stared at the address for a long time, the pieces falling into place. She wasn't just having an affair. She had another life. A place where she didn't have to pretend, where she could be with Ethan without the weight of her lies suffocating her. I should have felt shattered. But I didn't. I felt focused. That evening, Lauren came home with takeout, Thai food, my favorite. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and acted like nothing was wrong. And I matched her energy, smile for smile. Over dinner, she told me about her busy day. Her voice animated as she described meetings and conference calls that probably never happened. I nodded along, pretending to listen, pretending to care. I wondered if she knew. If she could sense the shift in me. But if she did, she didn't show it. After dinner, she went upstairs to shower. I heard the water running, the faint sound of her humming a song I didn't recognize. I grabbed my keys and left the house. The rental property was exactly where the documents said it would be, a sleek, modern apartment complex tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. I parked a few blocks down and walked the rest of the way, my heart steady, my mind clear. I didn't expect to see her car parked out front. But there it was, her silver Audi, the same one she drove to work every day. I stood there for a moment, hidden in the shadows, staring at the car, staring at the building. I didn't go inside. Not yet. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I already knew. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. The car, the building, the apartment number on the door. Proof. More than enough to build the case I was crafting, not for divorce papers, but for something better. Revenge. When I got home, Lauren was in bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when I walked in, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Where'd you go?" she asked casually. "Just needed some air," I replied, kicking off my shoes and sliding into bed next to her. She nodded, satisfied with my answer, and went back to whatever text or email had her attention. Probably him. I stared at the ceiling again, just like the night before, but this time, I wasn't lost. I had direction. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning was like clockwork. Lauren moved through the house in her tailored routine. Coffee brewed at precisely 6:45, emails checked before 7, a quick jog if she wasn't scheduled for an early meeting. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, her lips soft, her perfume lingering in the air long after the door clicked shut. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the door. Then I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you're happy. No, this was different. This was the smile of a man who had stopped pretending. I spent the next few hours putting the final pieces of my plan together. I wasn't going to be the guy who exploded in a fit of rage, smashing dishes and screaming accusations. That would be too easy. Too expected. Lauren thrived on control. She manipulated situations like a conductor with an orchestra, hitting every note perfectly. But I was about to change the music. The first thing I did was meet with Chris again. We sat in the back of the same diner, the one where this all started, our voices low over lukewarm coffee. "She's got the apartment," I told him, sliding my phone across the table. On the screen were the photos I'd taken, the car, the building, the unit number. Chris scrolled through them, his face unreadable. "You want me to get inside?" I shook my head. "No. I don't need that. I've got enough." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what's the next move?" I leaned back in the booth, feeling the weight of weeks of betrayal boiling down to this moment. "I want her to destroy herself," I said quietly. "I want her to think she's still in control right up until the second she realizes she's not." Chris nodded slowly. "I can work with that." And work he did. Over the next few days, he helped me gather everything: financial records, messages, photos, even recordings from discreetly placed devices he'd installed near her office. Ethan wasn't exactly discreet, which made Chris's job easy. But the real coup de grace wasn't in the evidence itself. It was in how I planned to use it. I needed an audience. Lauren's career was everything to her. She didn't just climb the corporate ladder, she practically rebuilt it. She was respected, admired, even envied. Her entire identity was wrapped up in the image she'd carefully curated. So, I decided to hit her where it would hurt the most. Her pride. I waited until Friday, a day she always hosted her executive team at our house for quarterly strategy sessions. It was her idea of relaxed professionalism, wine, catered food, and enough ego-stroking to fill a boardroom twice over. Perfect. The house was spotless by the time they arrived. Lauren had hired a catering service, the smell of roasted vegetables and seared steak wafting through the air. She wore a sleek navy dress, her hair pulled back in that effortless style she knew made her look both powerful and approachable. She moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, laughing, charming, effortlessly in control. Until she wasn't. I waited until everyone had a drink in hand, conversations buzzing, the energy just right. Then I stood up. "Hey everyone," I said, raising my glass slightly. "Mind if I say a few words?" Lauren glanced at me, surprised but smiling. She probably thought I was about to toast her, maybe praise her brilliance in front of her loyal subjects. She had no idea. "I just wanted to take a moment to talk about partnerships," I began, my voice steady. "About trust. About what it really means to support someone through thick and thin." Lauren's smile faltered just a fraction, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about that lately," I continued. "How we put our faith in people. How we believe in them, even when we probably shouldn't." A few polite chuckles rippled through the room, but Lauren's expression had shifted now, just a flicker of discomfort behind her polished facade. "That's why I wanted to share something personal today," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. I tapped the screen, casting the images onto the large TV mounted above the fireplace, the same one where we used to hang our Christmas stockings. The first photo appeared. Lauren. With Ethan. Laughing. Holding hands. A ripple of confusion swept through the room, followed by a heavy silence. Lauren's face went pale. I clicked again. Another photo. Them outside the apartment. Her car parked out front. Ethan's arm around her waist. The silence turned into murmurs. Lauren stood up, her mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. I didn't give her the chance. "I wanted to thank Lauren," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, "for teaching me a valuable lesson about appearances. About how easily someone can wear a mask for years without ever showing you who they really are." I turned to her then, our eyes locking across the room. "You've been incredible," I said softly. "Truly. A master class in deception." She finally found her voice. "Mark, we should talk." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "No need. I think we've covered everything. I looked around the room, at the faces of her colleagues, some shocked, some awkwardly looking away, some clearly relishing the drama. Enjoy the rest of the evening, I said, setting my glass down on the table. The wine's on me. And with that I walked out. Out of the room. Out of the house. Out of her life. The cold night air hit me like a splash of water, but it felt good. Cleansing. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because Lauren's world wasn't mine anymore. And it never would be again. The cold night air felt different as I walked away from the house, a strange mix of freedom and emptiness. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just knew I couldn't stay there, not with her, not after what I'd done. For the first time in weeks, the weight pressing on my chest had lifted, but it didn't bring relief. It left a hollow space, like the silence after an explosion. The damage was done. I checked into a small hotel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a place to be alone with my thoughts. The room smelled faintly of stale air freshener and cheap detergent. I didn't care. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a film stuck on repeat. Lauren's face when the photos appeared on the screen, her mask cracking for the first time. The shock, the disbelief, the desperate flicker of her eyes as she scrambled for control. But there was nothing left to control. I thought it would feel satisfying, watching her world collapse in front of everyone she'd worked so hard to impress. But now, sitting in this cheap hotel room, I realized revenge wasn't as clean as I'd imagined. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't fix anything. It just existed. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with Lauren's name. I stared at it until it went dark again. Then it buzzed again. And again. Voicemails? Texts? I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. Excuses, justifications, maybe even apologies carefully crafted to sound sincere. But words couldn't stitch back what she'd torn apart. I turned off my phone and lay back, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence settle over me. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it was restless, filled with fragmented dreams, faces I recognized, voices I couldn't place, echoes of a life that didn't exist anymore. The next morning, I woke to the weak light of dawn seeping through the blinds. My head felt heavy, my body numb. I turned my phone back on. 12 missed calls. 7 voicemails. Dozens of texts. All from Lauren. I scrolled through them without reading, my thumb hovering over the delete button. But something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe? I opened the latest message. Lauren. Mark, please. I need to talk to you. This isn't what you think. Please answer. I laughed. This isn't what you think. The oldest cliché in the book. I deleted the message without replying. But she didn't give up. By noon, the messages kept coming. Some frantic, some cold and composed. It was like watching someone go through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, desperation. And I didn't respond to any of it. Until one message made me pause. Lauren, you're not the only one who lost something last night. Call me if you want to understand the whole story. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was bait. And I took it. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Mark, she breathed, her voice a mix of relief and hesitation. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She filled the silence quickly. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But you don't understand everything that's been going on. I still didn't speak. She kept going. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Ethan was. She paused, searching for the right word. A mistake. I finally found my voice. You made that mistake for months. She flinched at the truth in my words, even though she couldn't see me. There's more to it than you think, she whispered. Then tell me. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. She looked different, less polished, more fragile. For a brief moment, I saw the woman I married, not the stranger who'd betrayed me. But the feeling passed quickly. She looked up as I sat down, her eyes searching mine for something that wasn't there anymore. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I didn't respond. I just stared, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I know I can't fix this. I know you probably hate me. But I need you to understand, it wasn't about him." I raised an eyebrow. Could have fooled me. Her lips tightened. "It wasn't about Ethan. It was about me. About feeling like I was disappearing into this life we built, like I was losing pieces of myself." I leaned back, letting her words sink in. "So you found yourself between hotel sheets?" She winced. "I deserve that." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. "I was scared. Scared of how easy it was to pretend everything was perfect when it wasn't. I needed to feel something real, even if it was wrong." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "And what about me? I was real. Our life was real." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy. "I know," she whispered. "And I ruined it." There was nothing left to say after that. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. She didn't stop me. She just sat there, alone, the wreckage of her choices spread out like shards of glass between us. As I walked away, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was free. Leaving Lauren in that cafe felt final. The conversation was over, the truth laid bare like the wreckage of a car crash. Nothing left to salvage, only debris scattered where something whole used to be. But closure is a funny thing. You think it's a clean break, a line drawn in the sand. In reality, it's messier. It lingers like the smell of smoke after a fire, long after the flames are gone. I didn't go back to the hotel. I just drove. No destination, no plan. Just me and the hollow ache of everything I thought I'd buried back in that cafe. It wasn't freedom I felt. Not yet. It was emptiness. I found myself parked outside a small bar I didn't recognize. I sat there for a minute, staring at the flickering neon sign in the window. Open. Like it was an invitation. Inside, the place was dim, the air thick with the scent of stale beer and lost conversations. I slid onto a bar stool and ordered a drink. The bartender didn't ask questions. He just poured. I stared at the glass for a while, letting the silence settle around me. My mind kept drifting back to Lauren's face, the way her eyes had looked when she tried to explain herself, full of guilt but not regret. She was sorry she got caught. Not sorry for what she'd done. The truth hit harder than the drink. A few more sips in, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not the searing, all-consuming rage I'd felt in the beginning. What was left was quieter, colder. Apathy. And maybe that was worse. I thought about calling Chris, about unloading everything in the way only someone who's been on the outside can understand. But what was the point? He'd done his part. The evidence had been gathered, the truth exposed. The story had been told. Except it wasn't over. Not yet. When I finally left the bar, the sky was dark, the air sharp against my skin. I didn't go home, not to the house that still smelled like Lauren's perfume, not to the echoes of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I went to the apartment. The one Lauren shared with Ethan. It wasn't about confrontation. I wasn't looking for another scene. I just needed to see it, to put a face to the betrayal that had been living in my blind spots for months. I parked down the street, my car hidden in the shadows. The building was quiet, a soft glow spilling from a few windows. I knew which one was theirs. I'd seen it in Chris's photos. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. And then I saw them. Lauren and Ethan, stepping out of the building, laughing about something I'd never know. She looked different. Lighter. Like the weight she'd been carrying had shifted. Maybe it had. I followed them, not out of jealousy but curiosity. I wanted to see who she was when she wasn't pretending to be my wife. They ended up at a bar, tucked into a corner booth, their heads close, drinks in hand. She touched his arm when she laughed, the same way she used to touch mine. I watched from across the street, hidden by the dark. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself. For not seeing it sooner. For believing in the illusion of us long after it had started to crack. I didn't wait for them to leave. I didn't follow them back. I drove away. Not to run. But to finally face the truth. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed, the room too quiet, the walls too thin. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos, vacations, birthdays, moments frozen in time. We looked happy. But photos lie. I deleted them, one by one, until there was nothing left. No evidence of us. No history to haunt me. Just me. Alone. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a bad thing. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not for revenge. Not for drama. Just to end it. Clean. Simple. Final. When I left the office, the sun was shining. The air felt different, brighter, sharper. Like the world had shifted, even if only slightly. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was moving. And that was enough. The lawyer's office was sterile. White walls, polished oak desk, and the faint scent of leather from chairs that had probably held hundreds of people in my exact position. It was a place where lives were dismantled piece by piece, quietly, efficiently, with the precision of someone trained to separate emotion from fact. Her name was Sandra Klein, sharp-eyed, mid-40s, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She didn't need to. Her reputation spoke louder than anything she could say. "I've handled worse," she said after I'd finished explaining, her pen poised above a notepad. "You have everything we need to make this quick. The infidelity, the financial records, the photographs, it's all leverage." Leverage. The word felt heavy, like I was holding a weapon I wasn't sure how to use. But that's what this was now, a battle, even if I didn't want it to be. I nodded. "I don't care about the house or the money. I just want it done." She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "You say that now. But people change their minds when the papers hit the table. I won't." She didn't argue. Just slid a stack of documents across the desk. "Sign here, here, and here." The pen felt cold in my hand. My name looked strange in ink, like it belonged to someone else. I paused before signing the final page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Such a clinical phrase for something so devastating. But I signed it. And just like that, a decade of my life was reduced to paperwork. When I left the office, the weight should have felt lighter. But it didn't. Because it wasn't just a marriage ending. It was the version of myself I'd built within it, the husband, the partner, the man who believed in forever. Now I was just Mark again. No titles. No attachments. The days that followed blurred together. I moved out of the hotel and into a small apartment on the other side of the city. It wasn't much, bare walls, second-hand furniture, the kind of place that felt temporary even when it wasn't. But it was mine. I kept busy, filling the silence with work, errands, anything that kept my mind from drifting back to her. But memories don't care about distractions. They hit you when you least expect it. Like when I found an old sweater at the bottom of a box I hadn't unpacked. Hers, soft gray, still faintly smelling of the perfume she used to wear. I didn't hesitate. I threw it in the trash. But my hand trembled when I let go. The divorce papers were served a week later. Sandra handled it, but she called to tell me. She didn't contest it, she said over the phone. Signed everything without a fight. I thought that would feel like a victory. It didn't. No angry calls. No desperate apologies. Just a signature and silence. It was like I never mattered. But maybe that was the point. One night, a few weeks after the papers were filed, I found myself parked outside the old house. The one we shared, the one where our life had unraveled. Her car wasn't there. Neither was Ethan's. But the porch light was on, casting long shadows across the lawn. I didn't know why I was there. Maybe part of me wanted to see if the walls still held echoes of us. I never got out of the car. I just sat there, staring, until the ache in my chest became unbearable. Then I drove away. Not because I was running, but because there was nothing left to go back to. A month passed. Then two. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday, just like any other day. I got an email from Sandra confirming it. No dramatic closure, no final confrontation. Just done. And that's when it hit me. Closure isn't something you get from other people. It's what you give yourself. I deleted her number that night. Blocked her on everything. Not out of spite, but because ghosts don't belong in the present. I wasn't healed. Not yet. But for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not because I was over it, but because I was still standing. And sometimes, that's enough. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I left Lauren sitting in that cafe, her mask of control shattered along with the life we'd built, or thought we'd built. 6 months since the divorce papers were signed, sealed, and tucked away in some dusty courthouse file, another statistic in the endless parade of broken promises. And here I was. Still standing. I'd moved into a new apartment, small but comfortable. No echoes of our life together here, no framed photos mocking me from the walls, no faint traces of her perfume lingering on pillows. Just me, a half-empty fridge, and the quiet hum of solitude. And for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. But freedom has its own weight. You think leaving the past behind is like flipping a switch. You walk away, slam the door, and it's over. But it doesn't work like that. The past has long arms. It reaches for you when you least expect it, when you hear a song she used to hum, when you pass a restaurant where you used to sit across from her, laughing at jokes that weren't funny anymore. But the thing is, it reaches less often now. The memories come like waves, smaller, quieter, easier to ride out. One morning, I got an email from Chris. No subject line, just a single sentence. Ran into Lauren. My stomach didn't drop like I expected it to. I stared at the message for a while, then typed back. And? His reply came quick. She's not doing great. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Because it didn't matter. Her story wasn't mine to follow anymore. But life has a twisted sense of humor. A few days later, I saw her. It wasn't planned. Just one of those cosmic jokes the universe likes to play. I was at a coffee shop, one I never used to visit when we were together. I liked the anonymity of it, the fresh start. And then there she was. Lauren. She looked different. Not bad, just different. The sharp edges of her corporate armor were dulled, her expression softer, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, still carried the shadow of the woman I once knew. She saw me before I could look away. Our eyes met, and for a brief second, it was like time folded in on itself. She crossed the room. Mark, she said softly, her voice tentative, like she wasn't sure she had the right to say my name. I nodded. Lauren. Awkward silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. You look good, she said finally, her smile tight and brittle. I didn't return it. You too, I lied. She glanced at the seat across from me, like she was considering asking to sit, but thought better of it. I've thought about reaching out, she admitted, her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her coat. But I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. I wouldn't have, I said plainly. She flinched, but nodded. Fair. Another pause. Then she took a breath, her shoulders squaring like she was preparing for a meeting. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not the rehearsed apologies she'd given before. This one was quieter. Less for me, more for herself. I didn't owe her anything. Not forgiveness. Not closure. But I realized something in that moment. I wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't the villain in my story. She was just a chapter. One that ended badly, sure, but it wasn't the whole book. So I nodded. Okay. That's all I said? She waited, like she expected more. But there was nothing more to give. Finally, she nodded back, turned, and walked away. I watched her go, not with bitterness, not with regret. Just indifference. And that's when I knew I'd won. Not because I exposed her lies. Not because I walked out on my own terms. But because she didn't matter anymore. I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and stepped outside. The air felt crisp, clean, like the first breath after a long dive underwater. Life was waiting. Not the life we had. A new one. And this time, it was mine alone. No lies. No shadows. Just me. And that was enough. The end.